about violence, like there is like this idea that anarchists are like these bomb throwing terrorists that like try to use like any means necessary to like end the state or whatever, and like, well, that's obviously like not true. That like all anarchists are not like that, but most anarchists who see those type of acts being committed don't even decry them as being like particularly violent, because people often ignore the violence that the state commits. That people often ignore like that millions die like every day from like drone strikes or whatever, like hundreds die every day from like drone strikes or whatever. Like that's completely ignored in favor of outcrying against like anarchists who throw bombs, or like other radical leftist groups that throw bombs. There is also though like the idea that like violence, like in the way that people perceive it, is not necessarily like hitting somebody, or like what some people might describe as like doing what needs to be done, in the sense of like, if someone is like attacking me, like I've made a conscious choice to like participate in self-defense, which is like getting myself out of the situation and not initiating force on the other person. But I can't like assume that every single person is going to have the same reaction as me in the same situation. Some people will react in a way that threatens the safety of the other individual, because that's how people are brought up in this society, that there's gradations in people and people react differently to different things, and that no act really should be like enforced with some sort of like guideline oriented I was done, thank you.
Okay. As I said in the beginning, we depart from something real that happened. You can name any country around any change, and it's in the name of when you say that we had many revolutions in the history, and we know they never go in the name of the what you call always have been something different. Always the changing country. Just to give you an example, little revolution that we have in El Salvador, and 100,000 people die over there. But we have a little democracy, not with democracy we want, but still the high school students over there, they have a 2 pairs uniform free. They have a laptop in the high school. You can go to university in El Salvador. It's not totally revolution. It's kind of compromise, but you still have that thing for the people. I mean,
we're talking about one particular man.
No. But we never had any revolution for the one that you advocate over there.
No,
never.
But we're talking about how the myth that we're currently debunking is that anarchists are violent or terrorists. Because we can focus the discussion around that, because that's very specific. Unlike the other myths, which were
Also the other myth, in which case that anarchy doesn't have any structure, which we're participating in. So like, we would like you to be involved in that structure as well, to like, stay on topic. But as far as like power corrupts, like as you can see with the gentleman here that was like in for like finding a way to exercise his power so frivolously when he didn't really need to use it in such force. I feel that all of these myths and all of these definitions are provided by way of the state. It's like the state sees anarchism as like a direct threat on like the coercive systems in which they use to govern. And as far as violence goes, I feel that every one of us it is our human right to defend ourselves. Like, and by a police and a fucking racist, sexist police institution, every day that it exists, we are giving up that right. Like we have given up that right to defend ourselves, or our ancestors have given up that right
a lot of economic power was vested in this idea of private property. You know, and then there's like this whole thing, and our culture seems to have evolved into like really thinking that any sort of like harm to property is this huge, big, violent thing, and it really is not. And it's a fight against economic power, because when you do destroy private property, you're doing damage to the economic system. That is what you're doing with your body, and that is something that like the state just really doesn't like, which is why they perpetuate this whole narrative around that property violence is property destruction is violent. There's actually like a really great article on the table over there, like on the legitimacy of property destruction. Like talks about what happened in WTO 1999 and about how there was property destruction at the WTO, but unfortunately that was one of the reasons why it got a lot of media attention. And I mean that's actually something that's that's really sad. The fact that like we see the media gets attention when things are violent or whatever, and like when we all talk about blog, it's like, oh my god, and we got the media so much attention, and that's that's not right, but it is that it becomes a tactic for us to use. Unfortunately, it does, and I really do think again that property destruction is not violent. It is a tactic to be used to fight economic powers. And I think so. Yeah, it was Ed, and then I think Ed was first. I don't know. Go ahead.
I have a question, basically. My question is, since the word anarchy means so many different things to different people, my question is one, do we need to come? Is it anti-anarchical? Anyways, would it be against anarchy to come up with a definition for anarchy? Okay, you see what I'm saying? Let me go on in a moment. So that's one question. Another question is within that question is do we need to some way precisely define what we mean by anarchy, or does our actions and our movement, should we let our actions and our movement define anarchy for us? Okay, or should we invent an entire new word to say what we're trying to say? So these are questions, just things to think about.
Can we stay on topic though again?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, yes, okay. This is about violence and anarchy. Not
about violence.
Alright, Troy, is this anything to do with the myth around anarchists being terrorists? If it's not, please save it till after.
It's just so confusing, and it's like I sit there and I listen to you guys, and it just keeps going in circles. It just doesn't really like get into anything. I've noticed, and it's just
I don't think we're trying to get anywhere. I think we're having a discussion.
Like if you're gonna move forward on anything, like another form of anarchist, it's like, hey man, let's just go outside and promote, free energy and this is stuff, and move on. Come on.
It's not topic. And we can please.
I got something to add. Anarchism has been the thing that has scared the state the most out of all the isms. They've been terrified of it since the 1880s, and particularly since the Haymarket bombings in 1886 and then the assassination of President McKinley. Anarchism was vilified and turned into this terrorist idea of what it's been constructed as now. Between about 1910 and 1918, most of the foreign anarchists were actually deported. There was a law that came in, I think it was called the Anarchist Deportation Act, something like that. So most of them were actually thrown out, and most of the ones who were actually doing stuff with the International Workers of the World were jailed at that point. I feel we're coming back to that same point again, and that there's now the FBI is setting up a tribunal where they're actually invading occupiers' apartments, and basically if you've got a black bandana or some communication devices or anarchist literature, you can be deemed as a terrorist and have to be brought up in front of this tribunal. That's actually happening right now. So it's been constantly demonized because it's the one thing that could actually work if it was given a chance. But it doesn't have to be violent at all.
Right, and I think we have to remember that the only terrorists that exist are countries and governments with power, with military power. They're the ones who are actually
everybody's so attached to their property. So it's like if you imagine your own ego boundary extends around your house and your car and whatever, then it's like people are being violent against you. It's a quite evolved point of view, I think, to be able to distinguish your property from yourself. And so I think it's a kind of a slow pitch that the authorities can get out of the ballpark.
Well, I mean, I think what I mean by private property is not like, I think there's a misconception of what private property means. Like, private property for me is not my car. Like, that's not what private property is. Private property is like the means of production. It's like, Starbucks or these buildings. Like, that is what I would consider like private, this private property. Like, under, you can still own things. There's just common misconception that, like, within socialism, communism, or anarchy, that you can't have possession. But you can still have possession. You can still, like, own things. You just can't own the means of production. So when I mean, like, property violence, I mean property destruction against, like, the means of production, whether that's, like, at Starbucks where they're selling, where that's like, I think is, that's a capitalist institution. And so I think it's a little bit different. I mean, I'm not advocating that, like, I think if somebody went around, like, trashing my house, like, that's a little bit different than, like, them, or, like, putting, property, I'm so sorry. So I think that's a little bit different. So I think we have to make that distinction. And, and I don't know, is anarchy, like, the only philosophy that talks about property not, like, property destruction not being violent? Is that I wouldn't imagine it's not. Like, I don't think that's only to anarchy.
In terms of violence, or actually in terms of property destruction, I kind of feel it's kind of a waste of time to dedicate all this talk about it, because it has nothing to do with anarchism, really. It could be associated with anything. And what defines anarchism is...
Can't hear you.
I checked, go ahead.
What defines anarchism to me is workers controlling their own means of production, and that's it. Like, organizing, self-organizing, whatever it is, they control the product of their labor 100%. So I think that it's easy to get there peacefully, and also maybe it is counterproductive to, like, heavily associate anarchism, to feed into that myth that anarchism is directly associated with property damage, because it doesn't need to be, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's a recent, like, historically, it's a very recent phenomenon that, like, is particularly North American, and, like, it's been around for like 15, 20 years. It's not really that old or established.
This might be out of process, but are you going to talk about how anarchy is different from other forms of socialism or communism?
I mean, we haven't, we haven't, like, I mean, I think that, like, that's something that we could talk about, but, like, people want to talk about it, but, like, I honestly don't really know enough about all different types of anarchy and socialism and communism. But if people want to talk about it, we can. We can open up, we're gonna open it up, like, we're gonna go after, like, through these myths, and then we're gonna open it up a little bit more. So can we move on so we can get through the myths?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about anarchists?
Something about violence, right? And specifically when we're talking about violence of private property, I think the word to remember would be more like privatizing corporation. The companies that we're talking about that like violence would be committed against are companies that are already doing something violent with their own money or their own resources, whether it be self-destructive and or to the community. Like, for instance, CCA, we have all these representatory companies from ExxonMobil to Walmart and all these things that are opposing a form of violence on our community that is psychological and other forms of violence. And if an anarchist act goes violent against that, it should just be autonomous and happen. Something like that should attract destruction to itself because it's being destructive. That's all. You don't really have to address that, like, anarchy must establish this violence against it. It will naturally happen against those particular machines. So yeah, it's not like anybody's going to, like she said, storm into your house because your house is not doing anything destructive to the community and maybe less than the community. So the anarchy would not, there's no conflict of interest in it. I thought that was the most specific thing I would say.
Okay. So we're gonna move on to the next one, which is that anarchy is utopia. So anarchy society does not imply that it's going to be a utopic society. Let me read this. Anarchism is a movement for human freedom. It is concrete, democratic, and egalitarian. Anarchism began and remains a direct challenge by the underprivileged to their oppression and exploitation. It opposes both insidious growth of state power and the pernicious ethos of possessive individualism, which together or separately ultimately serve only the interests of the few at the expense of the rest. Anarchism is both a theory and a practice of life. Philosophically, it aims for the maximum accord between the individual, society, and nature. Practically, it aims for us to organize and live our lives in such a way as to make politicians, governments, states, and their officials superfluous. In an anarchist society, mutually respectful, sovereign individuals will be organized in non-coercive relationships within naturally defined communities in which means of production and distribution are held in common. Anarchists are not dreamers, obsessed with abstract principles and theoretical constructs. Anarchists are well aware that a perfect society cannot be won tomorrow. Indeed, the struggle lasts forever. However, it is the vision that provides the spur of struggle against things as they are and for things that might be. Ultimately, only struggle determines outcome, and progress towards a more meaningful community must begin with the will to resist every form of injustice. In general terms, this means challenging all exploitation and defying the legitimacy of all coercive authority. If anarchists have one article of unshakable faith, it is that once the habit of deferring to politicians or ideologues is lost, and that of resistance to domination and exploitation is acquired, then ordinary people have a capacity to organize every aspect of their lives in their own interests, anywhere and at any time, both freely and fairly. Anarchists do not stand aside from popular struggle, nor do they attempt to dominate it. They seek to contribute practically whatever they can, and also to assist within it the highest possible levels of both individual self-development and of group solidarity. It is possible to recognize anarchist ideas concerning voluntary relationships, egalitarian participation in decision-making processes, mutual aid, and a related critique of all forms of domination in philosophical, social, and revolutionary movements in all times and places. So basically, yeah, I mean, this all kind of goes over a lot of anarchy, but basically, yeah, anarchy is not some sort of utopic vision of a perfect society. It's about a lot of struggle and a lot about trying to actually get to just a better, more egalitarian, free society. Any comments on that? Or we can move on to the last myth.
The last myth is that it's against human nature to be, that anarchism is against human nature. As an idea, anarchism and similarly socialism and communism is attacked and discredited because many feel, especially in the West, that people aren't nice enough to treat each other well without authority figures, and that it goes against human nature. The abstraction of human nature derives itself from social Darwinism, now considered an antiquated idea, which expresses essentially the same thing, that people are by nature competitive, evil, and will go to any length to win or beat others. Taken at face value, this could be a plausible hypothesis. Surely, some of these symptoms apply to our society in many ways. Yet, humans can be generally described as anything one would like to. Bad, good, greedy, kind, selfish, humble, disrespectful, noble, etc. Labeling all people to be some certain way is a dangerous thing. Certainly not all humans are the same, and it would be foolish to assert something like that. Yet many do, saying that humans are by nature competitive. Anarchists, in addition to others, disagree with this for a number of reasons. People are capable of working together in groups for absolutely no personal gain. They participate in community projects that share their resources for the betterment of all. They donate to charities, spend time caring for children, the elderly, and the poor. In 1902, Peter Kropotkin, the Russian aristocrat turned natural scientist, wrote Mutual Aid, in which he argues that it is the characteristic of cooperation that facilitates the advancement of society, as opposed to competition. He studied the interaction of animals, savages, barbarians, in medieval cities of Europe, and civilization at the turn of the 20th century. He came to the conclusion that by working together, individuals achieve protection, attain older ages, accumulate experience, accumulate experience and learning, higher intellectual development, further sociable habits, and secure the continuance of the species and its future maintenance. This does, this does interplay with the notion of competition, but not on an individual basis. If competition does exist, it exists in the respects of the species itself against the hardships of the natural environment, against problems within community, and to come up with the best solutions to benefit all. Albert Einstein, who is an anarchist, gave his observations on the concept of cooperation and competition. This is Albert Einstein. Darwin's theory of the struggle for existence and selectivity connected with it has by many people been cited as authorization of the encouragement of the spirit of competition. Some people also in such a way have tried to prove pseudoscientifically the necessity of the destructive economic struggle of competition between individuals. But this is wrong because man owes his strength to the struggle for existence to the act that he is a socially living animal. As little as a battle between ants of an anthill is essential for survival, just so little is this case with individual members of the human community. Mutual aid is also a useful characteristic as it facilitates the ability for people to unite together against oppressive systems and authorities. This solidarity is a way for people to work to remove authorities and advance larger individual freedoms. Also, this notion of mutual aid is the means that the society can function more freely and with the interaction and participation of all. Anarchism then is a collaboration between the desire to expand personal freedom and the recognition that only through mutual aid and working together can people become free. Therefore, these combined premises show that anarchy cannot be at all analogous with chaos, since an order must exist within society for people to be free. Chaos is the absence of order, and order most definitely exists within an anarchical frame of mind, although it is not coercive and top-down like authority is. People within a free society need to recognize the rights of others as well as exercising their own. Members of such a society recognizes that their actions can adversely affect others around them and need to work to make sure they are not restricting the rights of others. While someone smoking in a small room is practicing his or her right to smoke, they do not have the right to infringe on the rights of others by polluting others' lungs with the smoke. Thus, even though the smoker have the right to smoke, they shouldn't around others who don't want them to. Those who smoke must realize this relationship and not do it. This may be accomplished without any outside or higher up authority dictating. So I think it's basically like a lot of people think that humans by nature are competitive because we want to survive selfishly and not as a community. And I think that's a myth because in competition with like the way nature, like for example, global warming, like against that, like I personally can't do anything to like help my freedom, help my own personal life against global warming. So this idea of creating communities so that we can help each other and compete against global warming is also an anarchistic philosophy, and that's why like by human nature, I think like it's not more about competition between each other, but more as a competition against oppressive powers that infringes on people's freedoms. And I think that's important too.
One, two, and
I heard over there that you say Einstein was anarchist, something like that.
Yep, I saw it.
Yeah.
Einstein, no, that is wrong. I studied it very deeply.
He wasn't.
I know his writing, and that is wrong. He was an anarchist. The matter of fact, he embraced democracy. In his letters to some of the presidents over there, definitely embraced democracy. It was against the use the nuclear weapons. Another thing, anarchists, what you say over there, itself contradict each other over there because they say that you need control. You know, even you need control in the same you read over there. It says that it's not a loose moment, but you need control. So itself contradicts itself because you need control in the society that we have. The society that we have in order for us to advance as a human. You know, if somebody come over here drunk, you know, and start to hitting people, we need to control somebody, you know, to take away. But we are against the violence. That is itself, it's contradicts itself. And another thing that you have to understand, we don't depart from philosophy that's never been applied in any country. We apply something real. Tell me what country is anarchist around? What country has fight for anarchy through the whole planet? What that's in the history that I have to say. Other way you just
You know what? You just get straight
invent
into one of
something.
these.
Philosophy, just philosophy. No, we have to be part from the real issue, the people what we can, how the perception of the people of us. Anarchy may be good when we evolve at the point that we don't need to control each other. At the moment, definitely we need to control somehow. Other way, we never progress. We all going to fight each other. That is the natural.
I don't think you were listening to anything we were talking about because like we covered all of these myths. Like you're arguing based on like the myths that we're trying to dispel. And like your argument, I don't think you heard. Are you like listening to what we are saying? Like how that it's not about controlling each other, but it's about I don't know. I don't
It's
know.
about order. It's about organization.
Nobody said that democracy can exist.
Order with
Take stack.
to control and enact order.
Can we go back to that?
He asked, what group of people has anarchy ever gone ahead and worked with? Okay, or where has human beings ever saw where anarchy was successful? I would argue that anarchy was successful for a great majority of the time the human species has been on this planet. Anarchy was extremely successful from the time the human species became to what we are now until about 8,000 years ago, and in many societies up until very recently. And during that time, there was people lived in cooperative groups with no authority over them to make sure that they behave properly. And this business of competition, most of those societies, there was a kind of competition, but the kind of competition you're talking about. It was the kind of competition that I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to compete against myself to see how much I can contribute, because it's so much fun to contribute to the group. And maybe there might have even been a little bit of competition between people to see who could contribute the most. But I don't think they thought of it as competition. They thought of it as just joyful giving.
I have to respond to him.
I just want to say straight up, like, anything that talks about human nature is total bullshit, because nurture and nature are one and the same. We live in a society that rewards competition, so to say competition is human nature proves how that is a learned behavior, because it's always around them. We as a human species, we adapt to our environment. So in a capitalist society, our environment, it rewards competition. So of course, it's going to be competition. And to kind of answer your question, you're asking what's the difference between communism and anarchism. Well, I'll put it really simply. Anarchism does not force cooperation, whereas communism does force cooperation, thus making it coercion. So in anarchism, it's voluntary cooperation. So you're not forced to be in a position. So that's how I see it.
Okay, so Nina?
Yeah, a lot of the things I want to say have already been said, like as far as people and cooperating together, living relatively like egalitarian since like the beginning of humans. And I wanted to say a little bit something about like the whole idea of human nature is just really homogenized form of this thinking about it. It's very interesting. So there's so many different kinds of like ways that humans have lived over like our span of existence. You can't really put everybody into a big box, and that's what a person would be doing by saying, oh, it's human nature to do this, human nature to do that. That also comes I think a lot from organized religion and Christianity, the idea that everybody is a sinner and everybody, like the original sin, everybody has blood on their hands, so to say. There's also another thing about like the contradiction and like control and all this other stuff. I think ability to have self-control just within the individual. Just also about recognizing your own personal autonomy, but also recognizing just the collective benefit of being in a community and not having your personal autonomy like conflicts like with what is good for the actual group. And that's what I wanted to address with the misconception on anarchy is just like, oh, well, I can just do whatever I want. I'm an autonomous individual. And yeah, of course, yeah, you could say that all day, but if your actions impinge on the rights of another person or on like, makes a group look really bad or does, it hurts a group more than it does it benefits it, then you would, then it wouldn't so much be like anarchist, I should say. It would just be some individualist, like pretty much trying to assert his or her control over the group. I don't know if control's the right word.
I guess I just wanted to say, I'm just going to say again the same thing Ed and Nita said, which is that for most of human history, we functioned as communists, basically, as egalitarian, as people, as a cooperative society, people helping each other. That's how we had to survive before we could accumulate surplus. And thousands, way longer than we've lived under capitalism, the competitive system. So just, historically, we certainly can do it. We've done it before, and now we have way more resources and technology that we could do it easily now.
That school of thought is actually called anarcho-primitivism. So that's actually like that school of thought, the way we've actually existed for thousands of years, is called anarcho-primitivism, and it's based on, and anarchism basically sprang from that idea, but became more complex. So I just want to address both what both of you said, the difference between socialism, communism, and anarchism, and real-world examples and how those two are interrelated. The Russian Revolution has a lot to account for. That basically, the Russian Revolution could have almost become an anarchist revolution, but it was crushed by the Bolsheviks. Right. So the main difference between socialism and communism, the various isms, versus anarchism, is they require seizure of state power. Anarchism doesn't require seizure of state power. Anarchism can bypass all of that and declare an autonomous zone and exist outside of the current system, which is what I actually think we should do. But there was an anarchist enclave made up of mainly soldiers in Kronstadt that were crushed in 1919 by the Bolsheviks because they were the biggest threat against the Bolshevik coup. There was also a group in the Ukraine who were, had millions of acres and had set up huge cooperatives and were functioning as an anarchist society. Likewise, all killed, sent to the gulags. Most of the people who were executed from about 1920 to 1922 were anarchists. They were all killed. The next big uprising was Spain, 1936. Catalonia was declared an anarchist autonomous zone, and the same thing happened. It was the communists sided with the anarchists originally, and then Stalin signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler, and basically they were all stabbed in the back, and the communists helped defeat the anarchist cause. But if you want to look at a great example of anarchism in operation, it's Barcelona, 1937, 1938. There's a big debate about what could have happened if the anarchists had actually decided to seize power the way the communists had. Maybe they could have held it, but they didn't, and it fell. The best current world example now is the Zapatistas in southern Mexico. They worked alongside with the indigenous people, and they are mostly indigenous people, and declared an autonomous zone, defended the edge of it against the Mexican state, and have held it now since the early 90s. And to me, that should be who we're looking to.
I put myself on StatMax. And I guess, can we think about closing stocks so we can move on to making it an open forum and also going to announcements? And then I know Eddie wanted to say something.
Enough.
Yeah. Okay, so a lot of there's a lot of different anarchist movements that have happened in the past, and not only like before before capitalism and before this hierarchical system was imposed on us. There have been anarchist movements in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Like now, like they've never actually stopped. What happens though is that history books are written by the powerful, so and they make there's no way they want to teach you anarchy in school, like in high school, because like guess what? It also makes sense. Like anarchy is like like all these other systems of social structure. Like I remember when I read the Communist Manifesto and I was like in high school, like I was like, why don't we live like this? I had to literally I had to my friend would like bring it in, like sneak it in, and it was like they didn't actually show it to us at my school. It wasn't like this thing that's like talked about, and so like this history disappears really quickly, and it's like, and especially here in the United States. But there's like numerous, so many examples of anarchist uprisings everywhere, all around the world, now and before and always, and will continue forever. And just want to add this in that also revolutions and mass struggles are called festivals of the oppressed. I like that. I think it's a really great way to put it. Okay, Josh? Are you okay? Okay, Alex.
Actually, but like I guess you're talking about like the cold hard reality of today, and like that's really provided for with Spain especially, but also like it's a new generation, and you don't have to think that long and hard to see how the internet and like basically we could have like we could be like Craigslist or like Craiglists, because like that Craigslist has the function of a government within it. If you think about it, like the internet is a decentralized government that provides for everyone in a way that's way easier to like connect people and order people, and like we could just be like functioning off of the internet, and like it's really not that hard to take it down.
Benji?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people misinterpret or misdefine like anarchy, and they like kind of like combine it with chaos, and they kind of like a lot of general people like don't know what anarchy means. And so when you say, oh, I'm an anarchist or I believe in anarchy, they say, oh, so you believe in chaos, oh, so you like everything to be chaotic, oh, you don't believe in anything. Well, that's kind of like different stuff. It's not the same thing. I think that like in regards to like anarchy and control and order, I think that like these sparks of anarchy throughout history like happen because of need. Like we've tried to separate ourselves from nature as much as possible. We try to separate ourselves from intuition as much as possible, but we're still connected to this planet, and this planet will tell us when it needs something. And sometimes people are that voice, and sometimes we respond like that. Right now, we need anarchy. We need a change. We need something like this, and that's why it's happening. Like regardless of like hypocrisy or something, whatever you want to say. Like you want to talk about hypocrisy? Look at the fucking city hall, man. Like you want to talk about some real hypocrisy? That's some hypocrisy. So like, personally, like I'm not always right, so I kind of sometimes think fire fights well with fire, but whatever. But fuck it, dude. If they're gonna be hypocritical, like who gives a shit? Honestly, let's make the change. Let's make it fucking happen. Sometimes it happens violently. Sometimes it doesn't. Unfortunately, not everyone likes the color red. It's just how it is. But when you talk about like anarchy being disorganized, that's not what it is. It's not disorganized. It's thought provoking, and it.
You missed this, but we talked about a lot about that.
That was myth number 1. We talked about it.
Well, I was keep fighting.
Okay.
I wasn't here for that, so I'm just.
I know. I just want to let you know that we talked about it.
I would like to add.
You're
compromising any you know, like having any like money or hierarchy or anything. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just saying, just in the, even like in societies where that was the case, that still cannot be used as an excuse to, like, you know, have it where, like how it is right now, you know, where every person fend for themselves. If you don't get yours, you're not working hard enough. Fuck you, you know. Like, I'm gonna accumulate as much as I can and just hold on to it, you know. That's what we're taught to do now, you know. And maybe every now and then write a check to a charity keeps a lot of the money anyway. It doesn't really, you know, a lot of aid doesn't really get to where it's going.
No, I was here. Yeah, before you say after her. Okay, something that has
Kara, he was
You and then Anthony.
Um,
You get a picture?
So I just wanna, yeah, history has always been provided to us by, you know, ruling class, and it's unfortunately the people who had the privilege to be educated all these thousands of years are the ones that have had that opportunity to get education, or to get, you know, to learn how to write and to learn how to read. So you're not going to know about things like, you know, anarchism is responsible for the 8-hour workday and the weekend. You're not going to learn about that, or about, you know, what happened at the, you know, Haymarket massacre. And the reason why there is this, like, just touching upon, you know, what he was talking about regarding, like, the working class dictatorship and the Russian Revolution. The reason there's that rift between the liberals that work with the state and, you know, the radicals that don't, is because they're working in tandem. The liberals are working in tandem with exactly what we're against. It's like cooperating and like exercising and like perpetuating that authority, and like, you know, it's just like for years and years it's just been like, why do you keep adhering to that authority instead of just like completely not recognizing it? So yeah, that.
Okay, first of all, we have to, when we meet here, it's with the idea to enlighten people with the knowledge that we have. You know, when we misleading, like what you just say over here.